there becomes a point in life where you have to decide can I continue on this path, or do I have to decide that it's time for me to be and do something different?
My degree is useless outside my profession. That's the message I received from a chiropractor wanting to make a career change. After years of specialized education and practice, he felt pretty trapped by his specific training. And it's a sentiment I hear all the time from professionals with specialized careers. Lawyers, dentists, nurses, accountants. Once you've invested years in a specific path, it's easy to feel like you're locked in forever. But what if everything you thought you knew about your career options was wrong? For example, the idea that your specialized degree limits you? Not so much. Or the belief that your skills won't transfer? That's not what we find at all. Or the fear that you're going to need to start over. In fact, we see the very opposite. So yeah. Or maybe what about the assumption that you're going to need to go get another degree? Could be, but usually pretty wrong. The truth is, some studies show that as many as 82% of people are doing work that is partially or significantly different than their degree or education. Most mid to large companies care that you have a degree, not necessarily which specific degree you earned. Jenna Murphy was a criminal prosecutor for over a decade, and she started feeling that her career no longer aligned with her priorities as a new mother. And at that point, she found herself at a crossroads that many specialized professionals face. With years invested in legal training, courtroom experience, how on earth was she going to pivot to something else? What was going through her head at the time was, how is a company going to value a resume filled with criminal cases and jury trials if she wasn't applying to another litigation role? It's easy to look at somebody else's situation and say, oh yeah, of course there's transferable skills. But the mental trap that catches so many professionals with specialized training is that when all you've known is one path, it's nearly impossible to see the bridge to another. The walls of your current profession just block the view of everything else. So I want to take you through how Jenna confronted this seemingly impossible dilemma and what happened when she challenged the assumption that she was too specialized to change direction. Here's just a little bit about where Jenna's career began.
I really don't know what the draw was specifically about the legal field, because if you had asked me in college, I would have told you I wasn't smart enough to be a lawyer.
Really?
When I was in high school, I had a family member who found himself in some unfortunately found himself in some trouble. And while I guess some part of me could have represented him, I did not think I could do that for other people. I knew that there had to be justice somewhere, but I also at that time, I felt like that there might have been some injustice that was done by the criminal procedure process. And so I began to look and I thought, well, if I decide to go and be an assistant district attorney, which is what the only thing I knew of at that point in time, at least I can make sure that the charges that I bring are appropriate. And I can feel like that there's a reason someone is being held accountable for the things they do. What I did not want to do is somebody walk in my office and say, I killed those 5 people. Can you get me off with it? And I just couldn't do that. But as a prosecutor, I would have the ability to be sure the charges were appropriate and to make sure justice was seen through.
There's often a pattern that happens here. What begins is a great fit gradually shifts as your life circumstances and your priorities change. The career itself doesn't necessarily become bad. Sometimes that happens, but usually it just stops being right for you in your situation. It's also what happened for Jenna.
Becoming a mom.
Yeah.
Getting married. Yes. Having
How old
2
are your
babies.
kiddos now?
I have a 4-year-old. He just turned 4 in June, and I have a little over 2.5-year-old. He'll be 3 in January. And that always, I guess, somewhere new inside of me that would change me. I just didn't realize how much it was going to change me. And it was those times that, for instance, that jury trial that just really bothered me, that I had spent, granted, I tried to be good to them and put them to bed and do all the things, but then many have not sat on my couch prepping for a trial that my husband sat beside me and didn't get any attention because I was working only to stand in front of a jury and a jury be like, whatever. And that was the part that made it really hard. The burnout was extreme. I think COVID obviously had a lull in it. Our jurisdiction in particular was not one that took a whole lot of time off. We got about 2 weeks down before we went back into actually having jail matters where we had to get people out of jail because misdemeanors, you just can't keep people in jail forever. And so that was virtual. What we took about 60 days is all we took before we went back to the office full time. Of course, I went back to the office full time and told them I was surprise, I'm pregnant again. Here we go.
Surprise.
Yeah. So, and then coming back, once everything loosened up post COVID, I'm proud of the sheriff's office that I worked with, but the speed and the intensity of which they were making cases made it really hard to adequately juggle the caseload and the responsibilities I had there and my ability to be a mother.
There's something interesting that happens even when we know we need to make a change. Maybe the writing's been on the wall for a while, but the career that once fit us, it's no longer right. We almost always actually need something further to kind of push us over the edge to make that change. We call this a career change catalyst moment. And here's Jenna sharing her moment that caused her to finally take action.
My kids had a Thanksgiving program at school at daycare.
Yep.
And I can remember being in court, almost running to my car to get back to daycare or to get to daycare, to be there to watch them. My mom and my dad had came from where they live. My husband was there. And so, of course, I rush in and I watched this program. Thankfully, I didn't miss any of it. But then I watched the clock the entire time I was there and then rushed back to go back to court. And I think that was probably the straw that really broke the camel's back, for lack of better explanation, was that I just knew at that point that I couldn't juggle both things.
Okay, so Jenna faces reality. Something has to change. But what? Her legal career felt like a box that she was trapped in. And by the way, this happens all the time for people who are in specialized careers. The real roadblock isn't your actual skills. It's the story you tell yourself about those skills. I'm just a prosecutor becomes self-imposed career prison. The minute you believe that your skills won't translate is the exact time that they actually won't, because you won't even try. So the really fun thing for us is when we get to help people work through this, then they can start to expand their belief and look at this through fresh eyes. And that's what happened in Jenna's case.
I can remember telling Philip, I was like, I don't know how I put on here. I put people in jail. Like that's not something that they're not going to look at this and be like, woohoo, And so
it doesn't feel like a success to other people viewing the resume. Is that what you're saying?
Right. It really doesn't. And I mean, I had some really great opportunities at my last job. Probably the most notable, well, no, not probably the most notable thing that I was able to do at my last job was at 33, 34 weeks pregnant with my oldest, I argued in front of the Georgia Supreme Court. That's an opportunity I will probably never get to do again. Maybe if I'd stayed in a prosecution role and doing a lot of appellate work, then I might have. But some prosecutors go their entire career and probably don't ever get away with not submitting an appeal to the Court of Appeals, but to get to stand in front of the Supreme Court of Georgia or the Supreme Court of their state and present an argument, and to win it, because that's what we did.
As Jenna began to clarify what she truly needed in her next role, she discovered that her ideal work environment looked very different from what she had previously accepted as normal.
I had to learn to stand up for myself and open my mouth and say things where things bothered me or where I didn't agree with things, so I wouldn't be taken advantage of. Maybe it was just the fact that I was so burnt out that I knew if I didn't say anything, I was having to put boundaries. So that was something I guess people kept saying, set boundaries, set boundaries, set boundaries. And I'm like, what you don't understand is I came into this job, my last job, single. I had no significant other in any shape, form, or fashion when I moved here. I lived by myself. I ate, slept, lived, and breathed my job. I went home on the weekends occasionally to see my family, but beyond that, I had nothing. I could devote 150% of me to my job. Well, when you set that up, setting boundaries, pulling back and setting those boundaries is almost impossible.
Once Jenna got crystal clear on what she actually needed, not just what she thought she should want, doors began opening. And I've seen this happen over and over again. Rather than force herself into another litigation role, she started focusing on the work environment and the lifestyle she truly desired. And this led her to consider a position that she maybe hadn't wanted to before. One that was a strategic move forward and what allowed her to get what mattered most.
I just had a really hard time finding companies and organizations to embrace the fact that I had spent my career putting people in jail or prison, that I had, sure, I negotiated a lot of things. But most everywhere would have wanted me in a litigation courtroom style role. And I really wanted somewhere that took a major step back. But at the same time, taking a senior paralegal role also let me learn this industry. It was going to let me have that time and flexibility that I wanted, but also would have made me a big asset to learn a different area of law and expand my horizons, so that if they couldn't offer me a jump or a different place eventually, that at least I would have those things under my belt finally, where other places would give me that opportunity.
During intentional career change, there's often this moment when you realize that changing how you viewed what you need might actually be your path forward. Specialists get trapped by titles and status, and often it leaves them missing opportunities for what they truly need. Jenna faced this whole dilemma when she was considering a paralegal role after years as a prosecutor. Her explanation to the hiring manager reveals a profound shift in how she viewed career success.
I think in my last job, because of the nature of where it was, and there's no denying that we needed more staff. We needed more attorneys. We needed more staff, and we needed more judges. I think anybody in that office to this day will tell you that the county is just growing at a rate that really needed that. And we just weren't going to have that. And so there was not the ability to say no. You kind of had to take and embrace whatever was asked just because it had to be done. I mean, at this point, you're working with people's freedom and their constitutional rights.
Yeah.
And so there really wasn't a whole lot of leeway to say no. So to have somewhere that I could say, I'm sorry, my plate is loaded. Is it possible to have somebody else work on that? Was something that was really important to me.
There's this quote by Orson Scott Card. It goes something like, "This is how humans are. We question all our beliefs, except for the ones we really believe in, and those we never think to question." The key here is often narrowing focus on what matters and expanding your beliefs about how what you want, what you need, might become possible. But here's what Jenna narrowed in on as what was most important to her.
Pay, flexibility, career path, and then the belief structure of the organization. And the pay was there when they made the offer. The flexibility was the fact that I was able to work from home. They're good about, if I can do daycare pickup and I can do daycare drop off. I mean, the first time I remember as I wound down at my last job, I had to do daycare drop off one morning. I looked at my husband. I was like, what do I do? Where do I take them? Because he had done all of this for the entire 4 years of our oldest life.
Yeah.
I could count on one hand the amount of time that I dropped him off or I picked him up. And the little one, even less so because he was younger. Career path, I wanted something that I had a really hard time finding places to embrace the fact that I had been a litigator and they wanted me to litigate. They didn't see the connecting dots of being able to negotiate contracts and things of that nature. So taking when the director of compliance who made my offer called, she said, "Why do you want to be a senior paralegal? Why?" And I said, "Honestly, I want to have more flexibility to be with my kids. I want to be able to have more time I said, I'm not asking not to work, but I said, I'm asking to not have to answer to anybody else's schedule other than a PTO schedule that, okay, there's too many people off. I'm sorry. Or yeah, there is something important that week. We can't go that week, but we can go the next week." I said, I want that ability. So that's why I want to be a senior paralegal.
When you get clear on your priorities and find an environment that aligns with those priorities, your specialized background becomes an unexpected asset, not a liability. In Jenna's case, her skills from handling criminal cases transferred perfectly to this new environment. And now she has a role that supports her priorities. But here's the funny thing that is even better. When you get aligned with the right environment, right situation, right people, that can expand quickly to something you never thought it could. She was initially hired on as a senior paralegal, not an attorney position. Jenna's specialized background quickly proved to be an overall benefit, an overall asset, and even more valuable than either she or the company had initially thought.
As of Wednesday last week, I was asked to step in as the third associate general counsel for the company where I am now working. That was a kind of a shock to me to walk in and just be content with where I was just there to onboard and meet everyone and get to know where I was working at. And then to walk into an office and say, you have a lot of potential. You have a lot to offer. We would really like for you to step into a full attorney role instead of just being a paralegal.
Okay, so we've already established that in reality, most of the skills that you've developed are transferable, even if you don't think that they are. You just need to reframe how to think about them. Yes, I know that's hard to do. So here's Jenna's advice for anybody who's in a similar situation.
I would give them permission. It's okay. Because I wallowed with that. I felt guilty for the longest time. There are probably people who still don't know the process that I went through, the links that I went through to make this career change happen. I was scared in that process that it would be detrimental to the job that I really needed because I have a husband and 2 children and really needed to stay in that place. I didn't need to be unemployed before I was employed somewhere else. Thankful for the opportunity that I had, but I would give them permission to go after that. But the other thing is make sure that you define what it is that you want. Don't settle, because there were times where I probably would have, but also when you select someone to stand behind you, like I did with Philip, make sure that you'll know when that person comes on. You will absolutely know when they log on and you talk to them for more than 30 seconds. You will know this is the person who is going to help me the most. And that's what you need in this process. You need someone who will have your back. And I probably utilized him more than most people did. But I am so grateful for his guidance, but more so of him just simply reminding me to stay in the place where I was and to stand strong and not relinquish on what I wanted.
When I think back to that chiropractor I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, or anybody who has reached out to me over the years saying that their training, their degree was useless outside their profession, I know it feels that way, but I wish every single one of those people could hear Jenna's story. The truth is, no specialized education or experience is ever truly limiting unless we decide it is. The skills that made Jenna effective as a prosecutor, her ability to negotiate, her attention to detail, her critical thinking were exactly what made her valuable in an entirely different context. And within just a few weeks, her new company recognized this value and promoted her. So a lot of people find this podcast wondering, am I too far into this career path to do something different? And the answer is an unequivocal no. Your specialized skills are not a prison. They're a foundation that you can build on in countless ways. The real question here isn't whether or not you can change direction. It's what direction would actually fit who you are now, not who you were when you started your career. And by the way, if you're stuck with this whole specialized dilemma, we would love to help. Just drop me an email, scott@happentoyourcareer.com. Just put conversation in the subject line. I'll connect you with the right person on my team, and we'll figure out the very best way that we can support you. scott@happentoyourcareer.com. Okay, here's what's coming up next week, right here on Happen to Your Career. Society calls a career change during your 40s a midlife crisis.
I was this trapped, caged bird, that I was not allowed to fly. And that was really devastating.
The real challenge isn't just midlife crisis. It's also not just about what job you're in. The real reason career change in your 40s is difficult is because many of the challenges are hidden.
My job was my identity. So I had to figure out who was I without this job and what did I want to do? And there was some work for me to understand that just because I left that role, I didn't leave all of my strengths behind.
The conventional wisdom says that your 40s are the worst time to make a career change. You have so many responsibilities, mortgages, kid activities, college tuition, financial obligations. You should just be grateful for what you have. But what if your 40s were actually the best time to make a change?